Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's online coach, body image and fitness coach. Today, I have a wonderful guest with me. This episode is actually going to blow your socks off. I literally say this every time I have a guest on, but to be honest, this one is going to be a freaking combination of body image, eating disorders, dating, which we all freaking love to talk about, and a little bit of enhancement and plastic surgery. So this will be a good one for you guys. And I'm joined by Karissa, who is a eating behavior specialist who believes that the ability to inspire is in the essence of powerful leadership. And girls, she is a hell of a leader. So babe, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here.
So good. So for those who don't know you and they're like, who the hell is Karissa? Can you please tell them how did you eventuate becoming a eating behavior specialist?
Yeah, sure. Because it's an unusual title, right? So, I mean, my journey to becoming an eating behavior specialist started with a very long, almost 2-decade long struggle with my own eating disorder. So I did a Bachelor of Science, majoring in nutrition. And then I did psychology, and then I did neuroscience. And all through that, I was a personal trainer. So I was in the fitness industry and I was severely struggling with an eating disorder. I was diagnosed with anorexia when I was a teenager. And then I, got help and was spat out of the system quite quickly, as they have to do. They're trying to get you well enough to go and cope on your own. And I developed bulimia, and I really struggled, and I struggled with that in secret. And my experience of working in the fitness industry was this huge, immense pressure to look a certain way. And, there's so much at stake, and I believe, when you're in the fitness industry. And look, there's so much pressure on women, full stop, to look a certain way. But on personal trainers in particular, there is a huge pressure. And I really succumbed to that, So I battled in silence for a really long time. And in my last 5 years of my struggle, I reached out, I told my family, and it made a difference. And I got some serious help with it all. But it took me so long to recover. And that drove my passion, because, when I set my mind to doing something, I usually in my life feel like I can achieve it. So it was incredibly frustrating to feel like I didn't have the resources at my disposal. Like, I was in therapy, I'd seen a psychiatrist, I read every self-help book, I did all the courses, I did every single diet out there, and just nothing worked for me. So that led me to wanting to create something totally different. And I felt like you need more than just psychology. You need more than just a diet. So I decided to go get qualified in all of it. So I could really target it from, all three aspects that I think contributed to my recovery.
I freaking love that. There's nothing more motivating than doing the research yourself and the study to eventually be able to help girls to actually get, the help that you didn't get for, helping them. Now, during that transition, during your journey, what was the most frustrating part about it?
I mean, the frustrating thing, there were several. I suppose for me, the frustrating thing was not understanding why I was behaving in this way. And I'm sure, anyone listening, it's the binge eating, right? It's the overeating. We're all happy enough to restrict. We're all happy enough to be overly controlled. We don't tend to get too upset at those behaviors. And although we eventually do, they become obsessive. But it was just these constant binges and this every day waking up and promising myself today will be different. And today was never different for 15 years. And it just did my head in, and I didn't understand why. It's a huge element. I do a lot of education in the work that I do with my girls now, because I really believe that when you understand why you're doing something and what can help and why it helps, I just think it really boosts your ability to actually stick to it, you know?
I love that. That's so empowering, and it's not spoken out enough. And I love the fact that you mentioned how it's very easy for us not to eat because we're good at restricting ourselves, but not many people actually openly enough talk about the binge eating side of things.
No, we don't. And I think it's a really taboo topic. And, you know, I suppose the other thing that I found really difficult in my journey was when I thought I was recovered. I feel like my recovery went in two phases. I kind of got myself out of a desperate health situation where I'd lost my period. I was very dizzy and you know, just not really functioning at a high level. And I went through a second phase in my recovery. But the reason I had to do it in two parts was because after I got through my first urgent weight restored period back part of recovery, you know, you talk to your mom, you talk to your girlfriends, you talk to your sisters, they're all complaining about how fat they are, how they can't stick to a diet, you know, how, you know, making jokes about overeating. And you think, oh, well, I've made it. I'm normal. I'm recovered. And I'm a big believer in being like, fuck that. We're not recovered. This shouldn't be the norm that women are obsessed with their weight and struggle to lose weight. Like, what kind of norm is that? And so I'm a big believer in let's take recovery to the next level. And same with people who don't have a diagnosed eating disorder. If you are struggling with your weight and binge eating, like, don't settle for that. Just because the average woman doesn't mean we should have to. You know, it's a bit of a crazy norm, in my opinion.
And I think it's norm because they're either unconsciously aware of those behaviors, or they see so many other women doing that and they're like, oh, well, she's doing so it's fine. I don't feel so weird about it. And it's so funny that you mentioned that, because growing up, I was around older women who tend to put themselves down with their weight, who would always be like, oh, I'm a kilo heavier today. Oh my God, I'm just not going to have breakfast, or I'm not going to eat for the rest of today. But then the weekend comes and they're like splurging on like cakes and breads and whatever. And it's just like, wow, it's so interesting to see that pattern now. But when we were younger, we started adopting those patterns. So no wonder when we grow up, we tend to do the same patterns because we don't know any different. And that's why we think it's the norm.
Yeah, absolutely. We are. And you know, it's tough for mums because they're doing the best they can. They don't realize, they certainly didn't, you know, my mom and her generation certainly didn't realize the impact that their behavior had around dieting. But kids are totally like, monkey see, monkey do, you know, it doesn't matter what you're like, you're beautiful, you don't need to lose weight. But it's like, well, you're doing it, mums, and I want to be like you because I love you and I look up to you. So we just copy that subconsciously, right?
Yeah, it's scary. It's really, really scary. Do you work mainly with younger girls? Like, do you see this pattern with younger girls, or do you see this pattern with older females as well?
You know, I actually was talking about this to a client recently, and there seems to be three age ranges that I work with. And this obviously isn't exclusively, but I'm working a lot with girls in their young 20s, say, you know, 22 to 24 kind of age. They've battled, you know, usually, you know, being overweight, trying all the diets, seeing their moms go through this pattern. And they are just these real go-getter girls. Like, my young girls are real go-getters. And they're like, screw this life. I'm not living like this. Karissa, like, preventative. I don't want this to get any worse. And it's really amazing. I wish I had that attitude at 23, you know. The second age bracket I see is like women in their early 30s who are a bit like, fuck this. Like, I'm a woman. I don't have to live up to societal standards of what people say I should look like. You know, I want to just enjoy my food. I don't need a six pack anymore. I'm not 20. I don't care. I just want to feel good and feel fit and healthy. And then the third common age range I have is like late 40s, and women are like, Karissa, I'm about to turn 50. This is fucked. Like, I have spent half my life being obsessed with food, obsessed with my body. You know, this has got to end. I can't keep living like this. It is so consuming. And they're usually just like, whatever it takes. And they're great. They'll do anything because they're like, make it end. And, you know, so they're kind of the three life stages, I suppose, that I see the most.
It's fascinating. I can so relate to this because I work with different age groups as well. And it's fascinating to see how the older women are just, they're fed up. They're fed up of the old shit, the bad habits. And they're like, all right, I'm done. Like, I'm ready to change. And then when you step into your 30s, I can relate to this so well because I remember when I turned 34 years ago, I was just like, I'm done with dieting. I'm done with trying to be the smallest version of myself. I want to get strong. I don't care if I have a bit of a stomach, don't care about the abs anymore. You realize at some stage in your life how draining it is to constantly diet or to constantly hold on to this image of you having abs. It's just like, this is not fun anymore. Like, I'm tired.
Yeah, it's not worth it, is it? You know, you wake up with abs, you finally get the abs, you wake up with them one morning and you have a sip of water, you know, or you have your breakfast and they disappear and you become so critical. You can't even see it. You know, I look back on photos, I'm sure you can too. You look back on photos and I scroll through my phone and I see photos where I think, oh my God, I'm going to keep this photo as a reminder of how fat I am. And I look back on those photos and I'm like, oh my God, you look sick. You're so thin. And it's just, you know, or you're just like, you know, there's some photos I look back and I think, oh my God, your body looks great. What was going on through your head? So I do feel like that it's a bit of a catch-22. You get the body, but you're so critical and obsessed that you don't even appreciate it when you get there. Or your methods are so unsustainable that you have it for a few weeks or months and then you just regain all the weight so quickly.
And this is what happens with negative body image. You know, it's so related to eating disorders and binge eating because of those bad habits, and especially with I'm sure men go through this as well, but not as much as women, where with women we tend to be so obsessed with how we look that we end up having this really shitty lifestyle around food.
Yeah, we really do. And you know what? The research is incredible around this, right? And if I knew this, it would totally have transformed my thinking. And I hope anyone listening to this can really take this on board, because what the research shows us is the more you hate your body, the more likely you are to binge, overeat, and end up overweight. And that the women who successfully lose weight and keep it off are the ones who have a more positive body image, and their weight loss goals come from a place of, you know what, I respect myself. I'm a cool chick. I want a great fit body to go along with it. And that attitude is what gets us these really awesome results. But we think, you know, that hating our bodies is because it's powerful motivation, right? There's two types of motivation, negative and positive. And negative motivation, which is that hating your body, is powerful. And so we rely on it and we kind of enjoy hating our bodies, and we almost look for triggers because our experience of successful weight loss is triggered usually by powerful negative motivation, but it burns up real quick. It doesn't last. And that's why people are like, oh, all of a sudden I start looking good and I lose all my motivation. But that positive motivation of like, yeah, I'm awesome. I actually respect myself enough to stick to this stuff and stick to my goals. That's what gets people long-term results. But it's, you know, people don't think like that. I certainly didn't think like that. I wish I did.
So true. And it's so good that you brought that up, because I literally had a conversation around this with a friend this morning, how this is going to sound so insane, but in essence, a lot of women, well, I can speak as a woman because I work with many, but in essence, a lot of the pain that we put ourselves through, we think we deserve to do it because we don't think we deserve any better. So we are constantly in this vicious cycle of pain, pressure, dieting, whatever it is, because you don't see yourself being that higher power self and being successful at getting over that binge eating. And that's why that pattern is consistently cycling through, because you may think that you don't deserve to be any better. So you stay within that pain because you don't know any different.
Absolutely. It's so true. It's so true. And, I don't know if you went through this phase, but when I went through my recovery, and I'm binging out of control and I'm wondering what the hell's going on. And, people are like, you need to love yourself. You need more self-love. I'm like, hey, fuck off. Tell me what to eat. Give me the magic diet that makes my appetite disappear. This is bullshit. I don't want to love myself. That has nothing to do with it. Like, I love myself. I'm great. There's a few things I don't like. Oh my God, was I so wrong?
I can relate to that. Definitely.
Yeah. Sounds like such bullshit at the beginning. And I'm conscious of that, when I preach the self-love stuff, that it's often received like, oh, cringe. And the more you cringe at that, the more likely you're probably struggling with a lack of it, right?
100%. But there's also like a level of acceptance and a level of self-love, because again, if you're coming from a place of disowning yourself, not treating yourself nicely, constantly binge eating, putting yourself down, of course that acceptance or that self-love motor is just going to go straight to the drain, because you're like, this is bullshit, because I'm doing the complete opposite. Like, how am I supposed to love myself when I'm literally, putting myself through hell?
Yeah, it is. It's such a cycle, isn't it? And we think, well, there we go. I did just binge, so therefore I am X, Y, Z. And it's so cyclic, and it takes something to break that pattern, because by definition, you don't think you're worth breaking the pattern for. And so it really takes a powerful circuit breaker and to break it usually, unfortunately. So it's a tough one.
That was so fucking powerful. You just saying that, how some women don't think they're worthy enough of that change.
Yeah.
And I hope that sinks into our listeners, whether there's something going on in your life around EDs or body image or whatever it is. Like, ask yourself, why do you not think you're worthy enough to actually overcoming this? I think that's a really good reflection of a question to ask yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. Yeah, for sure.
What was that moment in your life where you were like, I made it. I fucking did it. I got over all the shit that I've put myself through?
Yeah. I mean, do you know what? I still have those moments. For me, the thing, I kept no food in my house. I had a completely empty cupboard and fridge. And like, I'm talking, I might have some frozen peas in there and one tin of tuna. But I would binge on anything. I'd binge on cold rice. I would binge on, like soy sauce and vegetables. Like, it didn't matter. Like, God forbid chocolate entered my house, it would be gone within seconds. And peanut butter was my biggest binge food, and I would lose such control over it. And I think because it's like a healthy kind of binge food, it was just something that I think I tested myself with all the time. And every time I sit down and have peanut butter on toast, and I have my jars of peanut butter sitting in the cupboard, it is every single time I have it, I'm like, it's been years and years since I've recovered, and it is still such a moment of like, look at me sitting here eating my peanut butter on toast. It's such a moment. But I think, one of the first times I experienced that, I was out for dinner with my sister, and we went out for Mexican, and she was very, it runs in our family. There's definitely a fixation and focus on body and health. And we went to this Mexican restaurant, and I didn't eat at restaurants before that. Like, I would rock up to dinners because I was working late. And so I'd be like, oh, I have to skip the food. I'll just come for drinks. Like, I just didn't eat out, or I wouldn't order anything unless it was like straight up sashimi or something crazy. And we go to this Mexican restaurant, and we're ordering tacos, and we're drinking margaritas. And I just remember sitting here. It almost makes me want to cry. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, holy shit, look at us. Look at us out for dinner, eating Mexican food. Like, who am I? And it was this awesome moment, I think, because it was a shared moment. It felt really real. And it was just everything about it, like eating out at a restaurant, food I hadn't prepared, in inverted commas, the unhealthy tacos and the sugary margarita. And it was awesome. And I was just able to enjoy her company because every time I ate in the company of others, it was all about the food. Like, I was not there for the company. I was not there for the conversation. I was distracted about what can I eat? How much can I eat? what's the healthiest option on the menu? I'm starving. Why are we all chatting? Why aren't we ordering food? Where's the food? And then if I do eat, it's like, shit, how much did I eat? Did I overeat? How many calories do I have? What am I going to have to do to work this off? Should I skip breakfast tomorrow morning? Fuck, should I just keep eating? Should I have a binge? Should I throw it out? It's just my brain. I can't focus on how your day was. I don't care. I'm just so in my head about the food.
How exhausting is that feeling?
That just, there is nothing. People don't, women without an eating disorder are living like that, especially those women who are counting calories and tracking to a T, right? Counting every grain of rice. It is so exhausting to live like that. You don't even know what freedom is, right? You get so used to that. You just think it is so normal. And I can't, I'm lost for words at how exhausting that is,
I felt so heavy when you started saying, the constant thoughts that were going through your head, like, am I going to eat breakfast? How am I going to count this? Is this going to count for my dinner? Like, am I drinking too much? Like,
yeah. And, if I binge, it's like, get me the fuck out of here. I don't want to be here. Like, I don't want to be at dinner anymore. Like, I hate myself for overeating. I hate myself for binging. I either want to get home so I can throw up my food, or I just want to go for a walk and get out of I just want to not be in your company because you're so uncomfortable because you hate yourself. It's like being at dinner with someone that you hate, except that person is you. And it's so horrible. It's such I just don't miss those moments at all. And they were frequent, that was just my weekly experience.
Yeah. It's really refreshing to reflect back and see how far we've come. And I can so relate to that because there were times where I went through, eating binging phases where I used to demolish a whole liter of ice cream in like an hour. Easy. It was like a weekend ritual, literally, whether it was emotional or whether it was me bored, whatever. It was like, yep, my liter of ice cream, I'm going to do it. And then eventually I realized, like, fuck, Siggy, you have a problem. Like, why are you doing this? And it's funny because during those years, all I was doing was wanting to diet, to be small, to lose weight. But little did I know, I was literally just self-sabotaging my progress because I was eating a liter of ice cream, which was probably about, I don't know, like a whole day's of calories or even more at the time. Yeah. So now when I go out, similar to your experience, when I go out and actually have ice cream, I'm like, cool, I can have a scoop or I can have two and I'm done. I am fucking good. I don't have to have this binge and go back to the ice cream shop and be like, I want a whole fucking tub and just go eat it. You're like so content with it all.
Yes. And, there's such an incredible thing that happens in the neurochemistry of someone who's restricting, right? And there's 3 phases to the neurochemistry of a restrictor. And phase 1 is our brain becomes hotwired to seek and find food. So you hear someone opening like a packet of socks and you're like, chips, lollies, I can hear food, I want food. You're just hardwired and you're thinking about, you're eating your breakfast and you're like, what time am I going to have lunch? What's for dinner? Is there any chips in the house? Like, it's just like constantly mind on food. The second thing that happens is that our brain enhances our taste receptors. So me, who is totally well-fed now, doesn't restrict. If I sat down with someone who was restricting and we both ate a slice of pizza, I'd be like, yum, this pizza tastes good. That person would be like, holy fuck, this is the best thing I've ever eaten. And it tastes so good. And then the third thing that happens is that our brain dulls our fullness cues. So you don't experience fullness. When you're talking about that contentedness, what happens in a well-fed person is that as you reach fullness, the taste of that food, your taste buds dull so that it doesn't even taste good anymore. And you're a bit like, there's no incentive for you to keep eating. Someone who's restricting heavily, and obviously the more you restrict, the more these mechanisms come into play, and you are obsessed with food. Food tastes amazing and you have no fullness cues. Like, you are fucked. Anyone who is restricting heavily and binging out of control, eating more food will blow your mind. It will blow your mind because food just becomes way less exciting.
How cool is that? I swear, I love anything to do with brain talk.
Yeah, no, me too. I'm obsessed with it.
It's so fascinating. And I don't know, maybe it's because of our own experience and background with eating disorders and helping clients, overcome this. it is a huge factor of our everyday behaviors, our habits, our rituals, our thoughts. So it's so good to, know those three phases, and for our listeners to be like, okay, what's happening right now? How can I, overcome this?
Yeah. And it's, when you learn that and you understand that, there's a real incentive for you to really assess your restriction. Because until I remember learning that at uni, and I remember thinking, shit, we have a problem here. Like, I, for the first time, was thinking maybe severe restriction and starvation isn't the goal. And I mean, look, when you go full blown into anorexia, there's some different stuff going on. Your body, it's so low on energy that it actually kind of shuts down after a while. But most people do not experience that at all. At all. But if they do, if there's any people out there who are listening and like, that doesn't happen to me, they're probably so far on the other end of the spectrum, that they've bypassed that and pushed through that, which isn't a healthy thing, right? These are healthy mechanisms to help us when we're starving, because the body never thinks that we're starving on purpose. It thinks we're crazy and in need of our help, like Karissa or Siggy. They don't know how to feed themselves. Let me assist you. Let me to make food more delicious. It's a healthy response from the body.
Yeah. And also it comes from like a survival mechanism. Like, your body doesn't know any different. And that's the thing people need to understand when it comes to your everyday habits. Like, your body doesn't know the difference between stress eating to stress drinking or whatever it is that you're going through. It's literally trying to save you for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And there are so many parallels when we look at, drug use and alcohol misuse and, overeating and, people feel like they've got a food addiction. We can't be addicted to anything that we need to survive. But I sure as hell know that it feels like an addiction. And I remember, I'll never forget learning about that. And little Miss me in the lecture was like, no, excuse me, I'm pretty sure food addiction does exist. It must exist. I have it. And it's really compelling to discover that what's addictive. And that's when I learned all about the brain, what happens to the brain when we're restricting, and restriction gets addictive, because if you're an emotional eater, get this right. So this is where it's really, the binging can get out of control. Because if you're in restriction and all that brain chemistry is going on, so food tastes amazing, fullness mechanisms turned off, and you're hot wired to find food, and you're emotional eating, the reward when you eat is enhanced. So then it becomes this cycle where we're actually addicted to restriction because it makes food taste good, which means it's a better reward when we're hungry than it is when we're not. It's like training a puppy. When they're starving, they're going to be well rewarded by the treats. It's the same with humans. So inadvertently, we strengthen our emotional eating by strengthening the reward centers around food. So it's such a convoluted mess that we get ourselves into. And I think when people realize that there's actually so much going on that we can undo, it's not this overwhelming, impossible, helpless state of binge eating. It's we can treat it. No one's broken. You're normal. This is what happens,
It's so relatable to the fitness and health industry, with restriction of eating and dieting and people treating themselves or having cheat meals. It's literally that cycle of restriction for whatever amount of time you have, and then all of a sudden your coach or you tell yourself, oh, I can treat myself now because I was so good for the last 5 days. Let's have a binge, or let's have this cheat meal. And it's literally teaching your brain that restriction cycle.
Totally. I'm such a believer that cheat meals are glamorized binges. They totally are. Same with intermittent fasting. It is, in my personal opinion, the research is not supportive for females. There's a lot of research supporting men, and then the research is done on men, right? But they have a totally different hormonal makeup, and women, we're built to have like body fat and make babies. So we go into hibernation mode and we binge. In the women who do intermittent fasting tend to have problems with binging and overeating in the evenings, always.
Yeah. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I've experienced that myself, where I went through this phase of intermittent fasting when this whole saga came out, and they're like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever to lose weight. No. Little do people know, yes, intermittent fasting does have its benefits in terms of like health and gut health and so on, and brain function whatsoever. But when it comes to eating disorders and your relationship with food, it is fucked. It is not something that's going to support you long term whatsoever.
No, not at all. And you know, people that are under eating, their experience, they love intermittent fasting, right? Because their experience is, oh, when I eat my first meal, I lose control. You know, that first meal triggers like, oh, food's coming in, we're vulnerable, and the body's like, yeah, she's already eating. Let's heighten the experience of this so that we can take advantage and overeat. And so people love intermittent fasting because they think, oh, well, I get to push back the window of that happening. But that only happens in people who are underfed. You know, you eat enough food, and breakfast should leave you satisfied. It shouldn't trigger a deeper, more compelling hunger. That's a sign that something's going wrong, not that you need intermittent fasting, you know?
Yes. Oh my God. In terms of eating disorders recovery with your coaching, because obviously from your experience, you have handled this firsthand, but when it comes to coaching women around this, aside from the three phases that you mentioned around the brain, what are some other aspects of coaching that has helped women, you know, overcome these binge episodes?
Yeah, I mean, I spent a really long time. I spent half a year designing my program, which is called the Food Rehab Program, and I only run the intensive version now, and it has all of these different elements, and there's a huge educational element. Like I mentioned before, women need to understand this stuff. When you know what's happening in your brain and you understand the impacts of your decisions, it's so much easier to want to change, because otherwise people spend years in therapy and they're like, oh, my therapist said I should eat breakfast, but why? Or my therapist said I need to eat more calories. Why? When you know it's causing your binging, you're like, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to do that. And so that's a huge element. So there is a nutritional element that it's really important. And I'm a big believer, you know, one of the biggest triggers of binging is snacking. And so it's about building women's meals up. We're afraid to eat, you know, we're like, oh, half a sandwich for me and just a bit of chicken and salad for me. It's like, no, fuck that. Eat a real meal and you won't be starving and thinking about food all day. And people don't realize how many calories they sneak in incidentally because they're not satisfied in their meals. So I do a lot of work around nutrition, about making sure people are well fed, making sure they're getting enough protein, making sure people are moving every day. I don't need you to work out and do CrossFit all day, every day, but get up and do 20 minutes of even just a walk or a yoga, your little mini yoga workout on your mat at home, just something. And so they're two really big elements. And then we do a lot of work on the psychology. Like, what are your triggers? Because I, for one, didn't think I was an emotional eater. I was like, I am so resilient. I have no emotional baggage and bullshit. Like, I am just so positive and happy all the time and motivated and determined. And what happens is, you know, when you watch like a pro football player or something, and before the other person, the opponent's moved, like that person has swooped in and like saved the ball or saved the goal. I obviously don't watch any football. No idea how it works, but essentially they can respond so quickly before the obvious move, because they've been doing it for so long that it's so automatic. And a lot of people that struggle with emotional eating, it's so automatic that the body, you'll be sitting on the couch and you won't feel any emotion. You'll just have a craving for food and you'll be like, I'm not hungry. Where does this come from? And it feels like a craving that's come out of nowhere. Cravings are a sign of emotional eating. So it's a really interesting thing to look at emotional eating for all my people who out there who swear they're not emotional eaters like me. And sometimes it can be to enhance happiness. You know, we think we're not emotional eaters because we're like, oh, well, I eat when I'm happy as well. You know, I eat to celebrate, I eat to relax, and they're all positive emotions. So really working on the psychology behind that. And then, you know, at the real core of what I believe it takes to succeed is we have got to learn to take immediate action. We really do. There's no, let's start again tomorrow. Let's start our diet on Monday. We have to learn to be halfway through that tub of ice cream and be like, no, it ends right now. In this moment, I'm going to step into the woman that I want to be. Every second you get to recreate who you are, and doing that in the mess, you know, in the mess of a binge, in the middle of a binge, because there's always a reason to do it tomorrow, always. And when we can start stepping into that in every second, things don't spiral out of control and it becomes way more manageable. But it's hard. We want to wipe the slate clean. There's so many women I work with are all or nothing, black or white mentality, and they're either perfect or they're destructive. And it's like, no, we need to find the middle ground. Let's not, it's that classic saying of, you wouldn't, hit one of your tires and then go slash the other three just because you've burst a tire. But that's what we do with our food. We think, well, I've had 2 biscuits after dinner, I may as well finish the packet. Like, what? That's not logical. So we're going to start using our logical brain, and then how to activate that in the moment when we're in a reactive eating state. It's uncomfortable work, but that's the key. It really is.
It's the work that needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%. And you mentioned before about regarding eating binges, but also the reflection on us being happy. And most of the time we're not happy during those episodes because, again, most of the time it comes from an emotional state. And that relates onto a body image, that relates onto our social life, our dating life, our personal life. So what was it like for you during your time recovering from eating disorders and dating?
Oh, yeah. Look, oh my God. My life revolved around being thin and dating men. Like, it was the 2 big things I wanted in my life. And I thought I had to have one to have the other, right? And a lot of women are stuck here. And the way we teach others to love us is through how we love ourselves and the standards that we have for ourselves. So if there is a lack of self-respect, if you don't love your body, you're going to be searching for someone who really brings in some external validation. So of course, the kind of men I dated were men that were obsessed with my body and had no interest in me as a woman, because I had no interest in me as a woman. I thought all I had to offer was my good body. And so what we see is this huge crossover with women who have disordered eating, hate themselves, don't realize they hate themselves, just have this preoccupation and this need for an amazing body, who then date men who are also obsessed with you having a good body, and don't really care much else for what you have to offer in the relationship. And, arguably maybe they do. It could have just been the particular men that I dated, being so deep into that pattern, but it's huge. And I won't go into the full psychological background of that, but there's definitely like a daddy issue thing that is a common thread on that. And it's tough, right? And I struggled, and rejection would trigger binging like nothing else, and it would be unbearable. Like I will, the amount of times that I'd be sitting there waiting for a text, being like, am I going to see him tonight? And I'm sitting there, and at some point, maybe it hits 5 p.m. and I'm like, it's off, it's not happening, and I start binging. And then I get a text at like 6 o'clock, and I'm like, well, fuck you. Like, I'm full of ice cream now, so I can't come and meet you. And it was just, and then I would hate myself because I ruined it. It was such a mess for me dating in that state. And I couldn't eat. I would have a date at, a dinner date, and I wouldn't eat all day because I was like, oh my God, I have to look perfect, and I have to have a flat stomach, and I have to wear, tight revealing clothing because otherwise they won't like me. And it's incredible because I actually went through my first phase of recovery and gained 5 kilos. And in my mind, I hadn't done my body image work, which I did separately. But I had done the bulk of my disordered eating recovery, gained 5 kilos, struggling with my new body, but also preferring being, healthy. And I met my now husband, in that state. And it was the first time in my life that I really enjoyed my own company and that I had interests. And I thought, I am interesting, and I'm up to big stuff in this world. And I'm of value as a partner way beyond what I look like. And I don't believe there's any mistake that I just was single for like 6 years before meeting him. And he is an angel. I never dreamed that I would even get someone so good. And coincidentally, about a month before I met him, I remember crying to my sister, like crying. And she's sick of it, right? I'm calling her crying every week over a guy. And she just was like, Karissa, I can't hear this anymore. Like, I'm so sick of this. And, then I call my best friend, and he goes to me, Karissa, I don't want to hear about any of these guys until he asks you to be his girlfriend. And I just was like, oh God, like I'm losing my support network. I am at total breaking point. and I took a step back from dating, and then I ended up meeting my now husband, and it's incredible to me that I met him in what I felt was like such an ugly stage of my life. And I look back on photos and I don't think that anymore, but in the moment, and I think that's really powerful, and I have so many girls I work with who are single, and it perpetuates the eating disorder cycle, because they feel like, well, Karissa, I have to have this amazing body to meet someone. I have to. And it's a very biased viewpoint, obviously, because that was my personal experience. But I do believe that when we can love ourselves, no matter what we look like, that gives off, like, confidence is, it's huge.
It's so relatable, especially, in this DNA, just like around social media, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, Facebook you're on. We get pushed this idea that women do have to look a certain way. So no wonder we have this pressure to, whether it is to look small or to have the big butt or to have the shredded six pack, because men are perceiving it as the norm and how women should be looking like. So in their eyes, they're like, oh, well, if you're fat, I don't want you, whatever fat means to you anyway. But it's just interesting. And the fact that you mentioned that you were dating men who were only wanting to date you because of the way you looked, in my eyes, the psychology side of things comes out of me, but in my eyes, it's like a mirror, because we didn't feel worthy back then, and all we wanted was to be skinny, slim, but we were binging because of this, but we were attracting men who were literally wanting us to be skinny. So it was perpetuating that situation. Yeah. It's like a fucking toxic relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. It really, really is. And you're blind to it. And you create this biased bubble, because obviously your top priority is looking good. So then you attract people whose top priority is you looking good. And then you think, you date like 10 men, and then you think all men need their women to look like this. Like, this is just all men. I give up. Men in Sydney are fucked. Like, they're shallow motherfuckers. And you just start thinking it's everyone. And funnily enough, since recovering and meeting my partner, I have such a different view of men. And I actually feel like I was really harsh on men for a long time. And look, there's definitely guys out there who are all about the body, but we've all got stuff, right? They're allowed to have their issues too. And it just dawned on me how many men don't care about that. They might not want a woman who totally neglects her body or is incredibly self-conscious. But certainly, we don't need to be these size 8 girls with ripped abs to get guys. Yeah, I can tell you that. Like, confidence goes such a long way. And the psychology of confidence is rooted in, I don't know you as well as you know you. So I think you're a little bit chubby, but you're super fucking confident. So you must be hot. Other men must love you. Therefore, I love you, because why else would you be confident? You must be. And, we see that with men all the time. They're super funny, they're charismatic, and they've got this like big dick energy. And you're like, fuck, I didn't think you were that cute, but you must be, because I love you now. Like, chicks can do that too. And I don't think we realize that we have that same pull on men when we can switch that on. But it has to obviously come from a place of, I'm a cool chick and I have so much more to offer. And I'm a value, and guys do want me, and it's not just because of what it looked like.
Yeah, it's changing that narrative. And unfortunately, like, it's easy said than done. Like, you and I know that from years of destroying our freaking bodies and minds around that. But there's a possible way out. There's always a way out. It's just a matter of you putting in the work and believing in yourself that you are able to achieve it.
Yeah, it really is. And it's hard, like I said, because by definition of that low self-worth, you don't believe it, you don't think you're worth it. And it's challenging those beliefs, which is uncomfortable. It's always, the work is always so uncomfortable.
But you have to do it, because if you're not challenging yourself, guess what? You're just going to stay in that cycle. And it's just like, you need to ask yourself, do you want to stay in that vicious, toxic relationship with food and your body? Or do you want to actually flourish and start meeting people who, are better for you? Your energy is going to be better. You're going to feel more confident, and you're going to be able to eat foods without having those fucking rushing thoughts in your head.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think some women also wonder if it's even really possible. I think for me, I thought to have that, I really had this dichotomous way of thinking where I thought either I'm thin and yeah, the cost is I'm obsessed and I'm exhausted, but the alternative is I'm going to be, morbidly obese, out of control, unhealthy, and hating, my body. And I really did think it was one or the other. And I am such an advocate. And this is, this is a contentious point, right? In therapy. And, therapists will say it's like not healthy to lose weight. It's not healthy to have weight loss goals. I'm a really big believer that you can restore your relationship with food. And once you restore your respect for yourself, you can have some really big, powerful goals and you can achieve them. And you won't let yourself get to a point that's unhealthy because you have respect for yourself. But you got to get to the respect point. Even better if you love yourself, right? Because then your goals are in check. It's not going to turn into an eating disorder when you love yourself. It turns into an eating disorder when you hate yourself and don't respect yourself. So I'm a big believer, like, if anyone's listening and terrified of repairing their relationship with food and thinking, fuck, well, Karissa gained 5 kilos and, spoiler alert, I gained another 5 when I did the work on my body image. It doesn't always have to be like that. I started from quite an underweight place and I needed that weight. Some people work on their relationship. I work with many women who repair their relationship with food and lose weight during that time because they're binging so often that just eliminating the binging, they lose weight, right? So it certainly doesn't have to be this, either I'm fat and happy or thin and miserable. Doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah, not at all. And I think it's just what the media perceives it as.
Yeah, agreed.
And too often, like when the media is pushing that onto you, of course, you don't know any difference. So you're like, well, fuck, I'll just stay in my vicious cycle. But as you're hearing this today, girls, and for the coaches out there, you can also let your clients know that, hey, there is a way out. You don't have to listen to the media telling you, to be happy, you have to be fat. It's just like, what does fat even mean to you? Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it really is. I agree. I really do.
Fascinating. I wanted us to finish off with your journey of your breast injury.
Yeah.
Not injury, surgery.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is related, this is really correlates to binge eating and the body image stuff that we've been talking about, because too often a lot of us women tend to do a lot of work on our bodies from a place of lack.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly me, I got my breast implants in, it was my 21st birthday present to myself. And I got them in, for the same reason that I was trying to be as thin as I possibly could, right? I just wanted men to love me. And I thought it would make me more attractive and more desirable. And I'd have this shiny armor of perfection. And no one would know what a terrible, hopeless mess I really was, right? And I got them done, and I do believe that it contributed to the type of man that I attracted, right? And so for me, like I mentioned before, my recovery was in 2 stages. I did the bulk of my work, recovering from my eating disorder, getting my period back, eating more food, learning how to keep food in the house, eating regularly, bringing my exercise down to a normal level. And I did that for a little while, and I was like, I'm recovered, and it's effortful for me to maintain this weight, but it's not exhausting, and I could probably do it forever is how I really felt. But I was still very conscious of how I looked, and it did consume me, and I would have bad body image days. And I just remember one day, I was on Instagram. It was a girl on Instagram, Vivian Horn. And she was sharing, she was like an Insta model, and she was sharing her weight gain journey and, recovery through disordered eating. And I was really inspired by her. And I thought, fuck, she is so beautiful. And she had the blonde hair and the blue eyes, and she seemed to have a similar shape to me. And I thought, fuck, like I could maintain that effortlessly. Like it would be so easy to maintain, a slightly, one size up. Like maybe I want to play around with, not like I intentionally wanted to gain weight, but like just relaxing into a more effortless way of living. And I really wanted to take my recovery up a notch. And so I did all this work on my body image, and I really looked at like, where does this need stem from, and why is it so important for me to look a certain way? And it was so powerful. And that's where I went from like really respecting myself to really loving myself and being like, Karissa, your mum fucking loves you because of who you are. She doesn't give a shit what your body looks like. Your partner, like, he wasn't my husband at the time, like, he loves you for so many other reasons other than what you look like. Your friends, your family, like, they were so happy to see me happy and healthy. Like, every time I'd catch up with people, they're like, oh, Karissa, you were just like such a pleasure. You're so present. You're so happy. You're so connected. And I just was like, oh my God, these people don't even care what I look like. And I really threw myself into this, and it was the most rewarding process. And at the end of that process, like, my breast implants just felt so not me. And it was a hard decision. Like, my husband loved them. He's totally a boob guy. And there was an element that was like, I'm done. I mean, I'd had them for over 10 years at this point. I also wanted to have children and didn't want to have these massive boobs because I was like breastfeeding boobs plus implants. But it also just felt like not me. And I just remember, and once I make a decision, like, I'm like, I want it to happen now. And I remember just like going to the surgeon that put him in, and I said, you know, like, get me in. I don't even want to come in for a consult. Just like, what do I have to pay to get an appointment, like ASAP? And he got me in very quickly. And I think from just making the decision and getting them out, it was like a 6-week turnaround. And I came out of that. I mean, I almost fainted when I first saw them. I was so shocked at how like shriveled and saggy they were. And I was like, fuck, I couldn't have taken these out without the work I've just done. And I came out of that, and I had a follow-up appointment with him, and he was like, we're going to have to do something. Like, they're very saggy. And I was like, I don't give a fuck. I can do yoga now, and my boobs don't get in the way. I can sleep on my stomach comfortably. And I just felt like me. I was like, this is me, and this is my body. And it was just cool. It was, you know, and I don't know, I think they were really big, and they, you know, attracted a lot of attention, especially male attention, and especially living on the beach. And having them gone, I felt like I was just like this incognito girl, you know, and I just really loved it. And I felt so comfortable, and I mean, you know, physically comfortable from being able to just like fit my clothes better and do my exercise better. But it was just huge. And I felt like it really closed the chapter on that whole journey for me. And it was huge.
That's so beautiful. I love everything about it. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Seriously.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
Because too often, you know, from what we see out there is us women putting enhancements because of the lack of beauty that we see within ourselves. And then once we get to do more work on ourselves, we're like realizing, oh, I don't really need this because this is actually not going to make any difference to myself. But why am I doing this? Like, who am I needing to support? You know, is it my partner? Well, why is my partner caring about these enhancements? And that's something that you need to question yourself as well. Like, are they in it for the right reasons or not?
Yeah. Like,
yeah,
it is crazy. And you know, if you ask any woman what they love about their partner, male or female, they never like, oh God, if they didn't have this exact body part looking like this, I would leave. Like, you just wouldn't. Like, you would never say, oh, my partner's shoulders aren't square enough, and so I might leave him. I'm considering leaving him. You know, it would never come to our minds. But as women, we're like, oh my God, I have small boobs. Like, I see my boyfriend looking at other girls and their big boobs, and I need big boobs. You know, this is a problem. And it doesn't have to be like that. It really doesn't. And, you know, I get Botox. I love Botox. And it's such a, you know, and I am really conscious when I do get it of why, what is the driver? And when I'm like, oh no, you know, I haven't had it in ages. I haven't had it in, you know, like, it's totally worn off. And there's a part of me that's like, oh shit, I need to get it. And I'm like, but do you? Like, you know, you should get it. It feels good. I like to get it before maybe my birthday or something. But really, like, it is a bonus. It's an extra. It's not like I need it.
And that's the difference. You're enhancing it instead of coming from a place of lack. And I love that you also brought up the part of the insecurity around women of whether they do have larger breasts or have smaller breasts, going, oh, like, do I need to have this? Do I need to do this? Or why is my boyfriend looking at other women? Is he looking at other women? We need to ask ourselves, like, where are these insecurities coming from? Because they will stem from somewhere. You just need to dive a little bit deeper to have a better understanding of why these patterns are happening. And most of the time, like, truthfully, it's because you don't see yourself worthy enough. But then you need to ask yourself, why don't you see yourself worthy? Where is that lack of self-worth coming from? Is it from your childhood? Is it from your mother? Is it from high school? Like, whatever it is, I find it so fascinating, and I'm sure you do this with your clients with the eating disorders, is having that understanding of where is this coming from? Why are you repeating this pattern? And it teaches them how to break it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the biggest clue for people who are like, I have no idea, and I have no idea, you got to look at, what can I forgive myself for that I've done in the past? What if someone asked me to confess their deepest, darkest secret, what would make me cringe to say out loud? That is the work. Like, that's the work that you need to do. Like, own your shit, like, own it, otherwise it owns you. It totally owns you. And so it's, and it's hard, I'm not going to, it's hard. I remember the first time I'm like, it's hard to get out. But there's the work, and it's learning to forgive. And if you can't forgive others, there's a really good clue that you struggle to forgive yourself. And when we can't forgive, we hate, we get resentful. So it's a good little, like, the forgiveness thing and the mistakes we've made in the past that we can't forgive. It's a nice little hack for people who don't know where to start looking.
Yeah, girls, do the fucking work.
Absolutely. And it's work. It is work, but it's doable,
100%. It is. And you get so rewarded after, because you're able to reflect back and be like, oh, look at me. Like, I no longer feel insecure about this, or I'm no longer binge eating, or I'm no longer doing X, Y, and Z because of, the way I look.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so freeing. It is so freeing. And you can go do big stuff with your life, get excited, make a difference, like, whatever it is, be a great mom, be a great sister, whatever it is that you want to be in this life, like, go do it. And it's hard to really give life everything when when we look at it quite bluntly, it is a total obsession with ourselves. It really is. We're so stuck on, what do I look like? What do people think of me? And it's like, no one fucking cares.
Literally, no one cares. And if they do, they do not belong in your world.
No way. And they just rarely do, because and if they do care, it's because they're so caught up on how they compare to you. And it's still all about them in the first place. So it's, you can't take that personally anyway. You just can't.
I love that. What an absolute joy of a conversation we had today. Seriously.
Love that. Thank you.
It was such a good chat. The last part that you were talking about freeing yourself, or like having to do the work, you literally gave me like goosebumps. I was like, oh, what's happening here? And I hope our listeners got goosebumps around that point as well, because it just shows you how valuable it is to make change for the better.
It really is. It really is. I think so many women settle for this life of mediocrity and just having an average relationship with food, and they just think that's all they can achieve. And we can all achieve so much more than that. There is so much more to life, right? But we've just got to choose it and take it and go and do it. It's as simple. The beginning is as simple as that.
I love it. Love. Before we head off, Karissa, where can our followers find you? How can they work with you?
So my website is withkarissa.com and my Instagram is with_Karissa. So you can find me there. You can do private sessions with me. You can join my food rehab program. And hopefully just you get a lot out of what I post on Instagram or in my email. So yeah, hopefully see more of you soon.
Yes. Yeah, girls, follow along. Karissa is an absolute leader when it comes to eating behaviors. So yeah, if you're needing some further help, go to that page and check it out. Give it a fucking follow.
Yeah, thanks.
Love it. Well, girls, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure that you screenshot it, tag us at the Women's Fitness Academy, tag myself, tag Karissa, and then till next time, remember to do the work and free yourself from those shackles of eating disorders.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Siggy.